Picture this. You're standing in one of the driest places on Earth. The ground hasn't seen water in 3 million years. Then someone opens a valve. Water starts pouring in, and within weeks, something impossible happens. Life explodes everywhere. Fish appear out of nowhere. Birds arrive in clouds so thick they block out the sun. And scientists can't agree on whether this is a miracle or a catastrophe. This actually happened, and it's still happening right now. California's biggest lake that absolutely should not exist. You heard that right. California's biggest lake. Not Tahoe. The Salton Sea. Most people have never heard of it, which is wild because it's massive. 15 miles wide, 35 miles long, and sitting in the middle of the desert like someone's geographic prank. But here's the thing. It wasn't always there. This was just empty desert. The Salton Sink, they called it. 230 feet below sea level. Hot enough to cook an egg on a rock. Dry enough to make Death Valley look tropical. Nothing lived there. Nothing could. Until 1905. That's when humans decided to play God with a river. The Colorado River used to be the wildest waterway in North America. Untamed, unpredictable, flooding, whenever it felt like it. Naturally, Americans looked at it and thought, we should definitely try to control that. Because if there's one thing humans excel at, it's underestimating nature's ability to say, watch this. The California Development Company had a plan. They'd dig some canals, divert water from the Colorado, turn the Imperial Valley into farmland, make the desert bloom. Standard American optimism, really, the kind that sounds great until physics enters the chat. They cut an inlet in Mexico, just a small one, nothing fancy. Water started flowing exactly as planned. Farmers were thrilled. The company was making money. Everyone congratulated themselves on conquering nature. Then the river said, my turn. In early 1905, spring floods hit the Colorado River. The little inlet they'd cut? Yeah, that became a gaping wound. Water didn't trickle through anymore. It roared. The entire Colorado River changed course. Not a percentage of it. The whole thing. One of North America's mightiest rivers suddenly decided Mexico could wait, and carved a new path straight into the Salton Sink. For 2 years the river poured into the desert. 18 months of relentless flooding. The Southern Pacific Railroad, which owned land in the area, watched in horror as water swallowed everything. They tried sandbags. Useless. They tried rock barriers. Laughable. They finally dumped entire trainloads of rock and debris into the breach. Thousands of tons. It was like trying to stop a freight train with a pool noodle. By the time they sealed the breach in 1907, the damage was done. The Salton Sink wasn't a sink anymore. It was a sea. A brand new body of water, where there'd been nothing but sand and desperation. The desert floor had become California's largest lake virtually overnight. Well, over 2 years. But in geological terms, that's basically a sneeze. Now here's where it gets weird. This accidental lake became a paradise. Remember, this water came from the Colorado River. It was fresh, clean, full of fish. And apparently those fish loved their new home. Within a decade, the Salton Sea was teeming with life. Corvina, croaker, sargo. These weren't introduced by scientists. They just showed up, riding the current from the Gulf of California. Like they'd been invited to a party. The birds figured it out next. Millions of them. One of North America's major bird migration routes suddenly had a massive rest stop in the middle of the desert. Pelicans, cormorants, herons, ibises, over 400 species of birds discovered this place. At its peak, the Salton Sea hosted more bird diversity than basically anywhere else in the country. Humans noticed. Of course they did. By the 1950s, this place was California's Riviera. Luxury resorts popped up along the shores. Marinas appeared, yacht clubs. The Salton Sea Yacht Club sounds like a punchline, but it was real and exclusive. Frank Sinatra and the Beach Boys showed up. Speedboat races drew thousands of spectators. This accidental lake became one of California's top tourist destinations. More visitors than Yosemite some years. Think about that. A geographic mistake became a tourist goldmine. A place that had been literally nothing for 3 million years became a thriving ecosystem supporting millions of creatures, and a booming economy in less than 50 years. It was the American dream in liquid form. Take a wasteland, Add water, wait for success. But there's always a catch. And this one's brutal. See, nobody planned for the Salton Sea to be permanent. It was an accident, remember? And accidents don't come with maintenance plans. The Colorado River wasn't flowing in anymore. So where was the water coming from? Agricultural runoff. That's it. Farmers in the Imperial Valley irrigated their crops. The excess water drained into the Salton Sea. This worked fine at first. The lake stayed full. Everyone was happy. Problem solved. Right, wrong. Because agricultural runoff isn't clean water. It's loaded with fertilizers, pesticides, salt leached from the soil. Every drop of water that flowed into the Salton Sea brought chemicals with it. And unlike most lakes, the Salton Sea doesn't have an outlet. Water comes in, but it doesn't leave. The only way out is evaporation. You know what doesn't evaporate? Salt and chemicals. Those just concentrate. Year after year, decade after decade. By the 1970s, the salinity was climbing. By the 1980s, fish started dying. By the 1990s, the Salton Sea was saltier than the Pacific Ocean. And it's still getting worse. Today, it's about 50% saltier than seawater. That's approaching Dead Sea territory. The fish couldn't handle it. They started dying in massive numbers. And when I say massive, I mean apocalyptic. Millions of dead fish washing up on shore. The smell alone drove people away. The resorts closed. The yacht clubs abandoned ship. The beach boys stopped showing up. The entire tourist industry collapsed faster than the initial flood created it. But the birds stayed. Because migration routes aren't easy to change. These birds had been stopping here for generations. Their instincts told them this was a safe place. Except it wasn't anymore. The fish they ate were contaminated. The water was toxic. But they kept coming. They still come. And here's where the ecological nightmare really kicks in. It exposes the lake bed, which sounds fine until you realize that lake bed is coated with a century of agricultural chemicals. Arsenic, selenium, DDT residues, all the pesticides that were banned decades ago but never actually disappeared. They're all sitting there in the mud. When the wind blows, and in the desert the wind always blows, it picks up that dust, toxic dust, and carries it to the surrounding communities. Coachella Valley, Palm Desert, places people actually live. Asthma rates in communities near the Salton Sea are through the roof. Respiratory diseases are common. Kids are getting sick, and it's getting worse as more lake bed gets exposed. California knows this is a problem. They've proposed solutions. Lots of them. Build barriers to contain the toxic dust. Import water from somewhere else. Each plan costs billions. Billions California doesn't have, or doesn't want to spend. So mostly, they just study the problem. Very thoroughly. Year after year. While the lake shrinks and the dust spreads, the current Salton Sea is about half the size it was at its peak, and it's dropping fast. Some scientists estimate it could essentially dry up within 20 years. Not completely. There'll probably be a small hypersaline pool in the deepest part. But the lake as we know it, gone. Which brings us to the terrifying question. What happens when it's gone? You'll have 130 square miles of exposed lakebed, coated in toxic chemicals. In one of the windiest parts of California, right next to major population centers. It would be one of the worst environmental disasters in American history. And unlike most disasters which happen suddenly, this one's happening in slow motion. Everyone can see it coming. Nobody's stopping it. But there's a twist. Because there's always a twist. Some scientists think the Salton Sea's collapse might actually restore something important. Before 1905, before the accidental flood, the Colorado River naturally flooded into this basin every few centuries. It would create a lake. That lake would slowly evaporate. The basin would go dry, and the cycle would repeat. For millions of years. In 1905, we didn't create something new. We restarted an ancient cycle. And now, that cycle might be trying to complete itself. The Salton Sea might not be dying. It might just be doing what this basin has always done. Fill up, evaporate, return to desert, wait for the next flood. Of course, that doesn't help the millions of birds that depend on it now, or the people breathing toxic dust. Natural cycles are great in theory. Less fun when you're living downwind. Meanwhile, there's another problem nobody talks about. The lithium. Remember how I said the Salton Sea is full of concentrated minerals? One of those minerals is lithium. Lots of lithium. Potentially one of the largest lithium deposits in North America. And in case you've missed the last decade of news, lithium is the key ingredient in batteries. Electric car batteries. Phone batteries. The batteries everyone needs for the clean energy transition. Multiple companies want to extract that lithium. They've proposed geothermal plants that would pull up superheated brine, extract the lithium, and re-inject the brine. It could be worth billions, and it might provide the funding to actually fix the Salton Sea's problems. Or it might accelerate its collapse. Nobody's really sure. So now the Salton Sea has become a weird intersection of environmental disaster, economic opportunity, and scientific mystery. It's dying and potentially valuable at the same time. It's a cautionary tale, and a possible solution to climate change. It's everything and nothing all at once. Some people say we should just let it die. It was an accident anyway. Nature will eventually reclaim the basin. The birds will find new migration routes. Life adapts. That's what life does. Other people say we have a responsibility. We created this ecosystem. Millions of creatures depend on it. We can't just walk away because fixing it is expensive. That's not how stewardship works. Both sides have a point. Both sides are also probably wrong, because the Salton Sea isn't a simple problem with a simple solution. It's a reminder that when humans mess with nature on a massive scale, the consequences echo for generations. In 1905, nobody thought cutting a small canal would redirect an entire river. Nobody imagined that mistake would create California's Riviera. Nobody predicted it would become an ecological disaster a century later. And now nobody can agree on what to do about it. The Salton Sea is still there, still shrinking, still toxic, still somehow supporting hundreds of thousands of birds every year. It's a monument to human ambition, human error, and nature's stubborn refusal to follow our plans. They flooded a place that had been dry for millions of years. And yeah, it changed everything, just not the way anyone expected. Thanks for watching.